Yo guys, what is going on? Got a rulings video for you for BT13. Super hyped to bring this one to you guys because there's a lot of cool new mechanics, and I'm going to kind of be going over all the major new mechanics as well as the tricky rulings and some of the combos that the specific new decks and archetypes have, as well as the new kind of game rules centered around the ace mechanic that has been brought to English early. We do have this in BT13, so the ace box toppers are legal for BT13, and thus the new game flow kind of takes precedence. So without further ado, let's kind of hop into it just because this video is going to be really long. The first thing I wanted to talk about is going to be the new attack flowchart. This is in Bandai's official rulebook. You can find it on their website. So not too much has changed here, but the really big thing I want to mention is this new thing called counter timing and block timing. Counter timing is not necessarily new to us, but it's called something new. Used to be referred to as reaction timing, but this is basically any effects that belong to your opponent that says when an opponent's Digimon attacks effects activate. So this is anything like a Ancient Troymon or a Hydramon or a Jerry, or something that says when your opponent's Digimon declares an attack, do so and so. So that's kind of the first part of counter timing. Now the new part is going to be opponent can activate a counter effect once. It specifically says once here, even though none of the counter effects we've seen so far are a once per turn, like printed on the card. You can only activate a counter effect once per that battle, once per attack declaration, regardless if it is once per turn or not. So you get the choice to activate counter effect. If not, then we go straight or regardless if you do or don't, you go then to block timing, which blocking, we know how blocking works, but now it's basically just its own separate step. So blocking kind of just happens after everything now, as opposed to at the same time as it was before. So like I said, not too many crazy things that change with this new kind of game flow, but the new thing to note is the counter skill. So let's kind of go ahead and talk about how these skills are going to work. So let's say in my hand, I've got this Wargreymon Ace, and it is currently my opponent's turn. They've got a Digimon on field, and what's going to happen is they are going to declare an attack at my security, since that's the only thing they can attack. So just like we talked about, the game flow is going to go, first of all, any effects that activate when my opponent declares an attack. So currently I have none, but maybe let's say I had something like a EX2 Jerry. This card says opponent's turn, when opponent Digimon attack, you may suspend this tamer to draw one. This is important because this happens, like I said, before the counter timing. So in the case of, let's say I had Jerry on the field for some reason, my opponent declares an attack, they've got no other one attacking effects going on, because that's of course the first thing that's going to trigger, but at this point they've got none. So let's say all their one attackings trigger, then I can use this effect to then trigger this to draw a card, and then now I can go to the counter step, which says I can activate a counter effect. And would you look at that, I've got a counter effect in my hand. What I do is then reveal this card. I say, hey, I've got this counter effect, it's from my hand, and I get to blast Digivolve, which just means I get to evolve an appropriate Digimon without paying the cost. I still draw from the Evo, and any when Digivolving effects happen just like normal. But in the case of Wargreymon Ace, he's got no when Digivolving effects. So then what will happen is we'll go to blocking timing. So then now, since I've got a Digimon with a blocker on my field, I can choose to suspend itself to redirect this Cerberusmon into my Wargreymon. Thus, even though the blocker wasn't on the field technically when my opponent declared attack, since it was there during blocking timing, I can in effect block without Wargreymon. So really cool stuff there. Another thing I do want to mention is that just like normal Digivolving, Blast Evolution, the only kind of special caveat with this is that it ignores the cost or doesn't pay the cost. You still need an appropriate Digimon on field to be able to evolve into. So in this case, I've got a black level 5, or I've got a level 5 with Greymon in the line. But let's say instead of that, I had this on my field. I would not be able to Blast Evolve Wargreymon Ace on top of Cerberusmon. I would need like some other level 5 that meets the requirement. So in that sense, it works just like normal Digivolution, but it's just during your opponent's turn, like I said, during that counter effect. The other kind of card I want to talk about is, of course, Metal Garurumon Ace. So we can kind of talk about that since I've got a copy somewhere in here, down here. What we can do is, let's say we've got the reverse situation where, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and swing into my opponent's security, but before my opponent, and let's say they've gotten the card in hand, what's going to happen here is before my opponent reaches a counter step, what's going to happen is I trigger all of my one attacking. So in this case, I don't have one attacking per se, but raid does work like one attacking. So what'll happen is I'm going to go ahead and raid by declaring my attack of security, switching the attack target to Cerberusmon, and then since I've got no other effects going on, then we'll go to counter timing. Does my opponent want to use a counter effect? Yes, they do. They're going to go ahead and Digivolve, Blast Digivolve into Wargurumon, draw their card for turn or whatever, and then use its one Digivolving, draw off evolution, use the one Digivolving, all before this attack connects. Let's say they used to trash one card, gain a memory, or I guess in this case it would be my turn, so it'll go back this way, and then the attack will finally connect, and in this case Metal Grumon is 11,000, I'm just 7k, so my Metal Greymon will die. So there's a lot of kind of stuff you got to keep track of, and a lot of cool kind of playing around certain effects you got to do. So guys, that's going to do it for the Ace monsters and the counter timing. The last thing I wanted to talk about, just real quick, in pertaining to the Ace mechanic, a couple things. Number one, the overflow mechanic. I forgot I didn't actually mention that. So if you look at the bottom, if you're not familiar with the Aces, it says overflow -4. When this card is sent from the battle area or under your card to other places, lose 4 memory. So this is kind of a balancing mechanic, just to ensure that I guess the cards aren't too broken with the free evos on your opponent's turn. But in this scenario, let's say it's my opponent's turn. I've got this Metal Grumon Ace on my field, it's suspended, and then let's say they've got a Digimon, I don't know, let's say it's boosted by 1k, just to make him bigger. Okay, and ignore the Belphemon for a second. But let's say it's my opponent's turn, and then what they're going to do is just attack over my Ace. Let's say I Blast Evolve this, or not. Even if you don't Blast Evolve it, the overflow is always active. So even if I just evolve this on my turn for 3, let's say they swing into this, and then, they're 12,000, I'm going to lose my Metal Grumon, and immediately upon the second it leaves the battle area, my opponent will immediately gain 4 memory. So they will go, in this scenario, go to 7. Or let's say it was my turn, and for some reason, let's say I swung security, and then security check, it's a Wargreymon Ace, or it's 11,000 body. This is going to die, and I'm going to lose 4 memory. It's going to pass turn. So there's a lot you got to keep track of, and this applies anytime this card leaves the field, whether it be bounce to hand, bottom decked, or anything put on top of security. So let's say your opponent had something like a Chaos Degrade, they put this on security, they're going to gain 4 memory. Or if you've got a Wyvern's Breath that deletes it by dropping to 0, they're going to gain 4 memory. The only kind of removal per se that doesn't get around this is going to be something like Aristardramon Superior Mode. So if we look at Superior Mode here, what does he say? He says, place one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon under one of your opponent's tamers, or Digimon or under one of their tamers as the bottom does evolution card. But this card says it has to be moved from the battle area or under a card to somewhere else. So if it goes underneath the card that's on the battle area, so let's say I've got a tamer on field, let's say I've got this cool boy, and let's say my opponent Digivolves this Superior Mode, they've got the appropriate cards, they've got the Hunter package, so let's say they've got one of each of these guys. So their field's something like this, pretty weird field, but they're going to Digivolve this, they're going to use this effect, they're going to stick Metal Grumon Ace underneath Cool Boy. Because it is still underneath a card in the battle area, I do not lose 4 memory in this scenario. Another kind of instance where this would be relevant, it's let's say is instead of getting tucked underneath something, let's say I Digivolve my Aces. Let's say not this deck. Let's look in here for something like a Wargreymon X. So let's say I Digivolve Wargreymon X because it Digivolves from Wargreymon. The Aces are not part of the name, so this is just Wargreymon. This is Metal Grumon. So let's say I just Digivolve Wargrey for 1. I'm not going to lose 4 memory because the Ace is still in the battle area. But let's say I swing into security and then I hit something like I don't know, like a Belphemon Rage Mode. It's 14,000. And in this scenario, the Wargreymon's going to die. This goes to the trash, and immediately we'll lose 4 memory. So that's something I wanted to mention. Now, as far as the Belphemon stuff, as why I had it here, this is kind of the last thing on the Aces. But let's say in this scenario I've got maybe a purple level 5. I've got a Belphemon in play. I've got an ace in hand. So let's say my opponent has, again, a pretty weird field, but let's say what they're going to do is it's their turn. They're going to declare an attack at my security. What's going to happen here is I have two things I could trigger, but, well, for the most part, I have two things I can trigger, because I've got the Metal Grumon ace, I've got the Belphemon as well. But of course, like I said, the opponent's turns affect when your opponent Digimon declared an attack. That always happens first, so I can choose to use Belphemon right now. If I don't use Belphemon, okay, like my opponents use all their one attacking, then it goes the priority pass to me. I don't use Belphemon. Then what I can do is I can Metal Grumon Ace. I can Digivolve this for 0, and then I can choose to, let's say, just discard 3 cards to gain 3 memory on their turn. The security check will go through. Hey, look at that X antibody. This goes to my hand. Pass turn, whatever. So that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is, let's say my opponent declares an attack. I want to use Belphemon's effect to discard 2 cards to end the attack. So let's say I discard these 2 cards. The attack is now over, and now since we are at the end of the attack, if you recall that kind of game flow chart I showed you guys earlier, this one, if you go to end of the attack, it's at the very bottom down here. Any end of attack effects activate, and then the attack is over. Notice how we've skipped counter timing and blocking timing, to where you can't actually use any ace effects if you do use Belphemon's effect. So let's say in that scenario I did discard the 2 with Belphemon. I would not then be able to also use the ace effect in my hand to then blast Digivolve after the fact. I would simply just negate the attack. Attack ends. That is it. I don't get a counter skill. So that's a more obscure scenario, but it did happen to me in testing. This works similarly with Omnimon X from BT5. Anything that stops an attack or causes the attack to end goes straight to the end of the attack portion of the battle flow. So that's pretty much everything I want to talk about the aces. The last couple things I want to talk about with regards to Belphemon are pretty self-explanatory. Belphemon itself, sleep mode says if you put a rage mode from your trash at the top of this Digimon's Digivolution cards, it can't attack and isn't affected by effects. That's pretty self-explanatory. So let's say I had this in my trash, I played this for 11 or something, and then I stick this underneath it. It's at the top of the sources. This can't attack. It's unaffected by all effects, whether it be option cards, Digimon, whatever, Tamers, whatever. So this is unaffected by everything. And then at the start of, or at the end of the opponent's turn, this inherited will kick in to then trash this card. And then I've got a Rage Mode on my field. So pretty self-explanatory stuff there. And then the Gizmon line, these guys are pretty straightforward as well. They basically, quote-unquote, Digivolve themselves by deleting the previous cost. So like, let's say I've got Gizmon AT on field, I can reduce the play cost by killing a rookie on my field to play it for -4, so for 2, and then I can use the XT to delete this one to reduce it by 6, and so on and so forth. And then one thing I want to mention is these cards say all turns this Digimon can't Digivolve, so you can't actually even get around this with something like a Metal Grumon Ace. You just straight up cannot Digivolve these cards. The next mechanic I'm going to want to talk about is the Burst evolution. With the release of BT13, we've got the new Burst mode cards from Digimon Savers. So let's kind of just talk about how these kind of Digivolutions work. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If you look at the black text box up there, Burst Digivolves 0 from Shine Greymon by returning 1 Marcus Daemon in play to its owner's hand. At the end of the turn, trash the top card of the Digimon. So let's say it's my turn and I've got both a Shine Greymon and Marcus on field, and I've got this Burst mode in my hand. Let's say I'm at 2 or something. What I can do is I can pay 0 by Digivolving this Burst mode, Digivolve this, return this to my hand, and then any on Digivolve effects happen. So in this case, I play 1 Marcus Daemon from my hand without paying the memory cost. I'm playing it, it becomes a Digimon, it gains Rush, and then any on-play effects trigger. If I want to suspend this Tamer, I can. It's treated as both a Tamer and a Digimon in typical Shine Greymon fashion, so any sort of relevant effects apply. It's 12,000. If I swing, I'm going to be able to minus 3k on something, gain a memory off of the second part of the effect, and then trash security off of the Shine Greymon. And then let's say I go ahead and do this. I do my whole turn. Let's say I pass turn with something like I guess just hard playing this for 7, and then it goes to my opponent's turn. Since it is the end of that Burst Digivolution turn, the top card of this Digimon will be trashed, so Shine Greymon will go to the trash, reverting into Shine Greymon. So that seems pretty self-explanatory, but what happens when the order of like my inheritance changes or whatever? So let's say in this scenario I'm playing against Mirage, it's still my turn. I'm going to kind of do the same thing. So let's say it's my field. What I'm going to do is go ahead and burst evolve with this for 0, bouncing Marcus back to my hand, applying any on Digivolve effects, and then I'm going to play the Marcus and so on and so forth. Let's say in this scenario I'm going to go ahead and swing security with my Shine Greymon, and then I'm going to hit a Sorai on my opponent's side of the field, trashing the top 4 cards of my burst mode. So let's say in this scenario it's just this one, then we've got Shine Greymon just by himself, and then in this case I guess my Digimon won't be able to attack. Let's say I pass turn, and then what's going to happen, since I did burst Digivolve at the end of this turn, the top card of this Digimon does get trashed. However, since it has no sources, there is no top card of this Digimon. So what happens in this scenario, if you lose all of these sources on a burst Digivolved Mon, it just stays on the field and nothing else like this just stays like that's it. It doesn't yeet itself off the board. But because you lost all your materials, there is no top card going forward. Now, another thing that could happen is, let's say instead of just having a small stack, I had like a really big stack. So my stack was something like this. So in that scenario, again, I'm going to go ahead and burst Digivolve, and then I'm going to swing with the Shine Greymon, hitting the Sorai in my opponent's security. It's going to trash the top 4, which are going to be these 4, putting me back down to a Digi-Egg, and then this one won't be able to attack, obviously. I'm going to pass turn, and then what's going to happen, since this does have a top Digivolution card now, the top card of the Digimon will be trashed, leaving just the Koromon, and then the Koromon will effectively just yeet itself off the board. In the scenario where Koromon was in the last one remaining, let's say it was like a rookie or a champion in this case, maybe you had some weird stack going on, then the Shine Greymon burst mode would just leave, and whatever is underneath would just stay back regardless of what level it is. Now, a similar thing would happen if, let's say, I checked into security and my security was a Chikurimon or an Ultimate Flare or something that de-Digivolves. So let's say they Digivolve 3, so 1, 2, 3. It stays at this Geo Greymon, and then at the end of the turn, the top card is trashed, but the Geo Greymon doesn't have a top card, so nothing happens. So it's just something you got to keep in mind when the number of kind of sources does change. It does actually affect what the top card is, and if it reaches 0 sources, there is no top card. This is the same kind of scenario where if you've got an Omnimon Alter S from EX4 or a Magnamon X from BT9, I think, those Digimon also refer to themselves as the top card. They say when it would leave the field, put the top card on security, but if they don't have sources, there is no top card, so you don't actually get the effect. The last thing I want to mention in terms of bursting, in the case of if you're playing against Mirage Galgamon, they've got this really annoying card here that says all turns when effect add a card to your opponent's hand, gain a memory for each 4 cards in your opponent's hand. Burst Digivolution does not add a card via an effect, so it does not actually trigger this. So let's say I was at a 1 for this case, and let's say I have like 4 cards in my hand, and let's say I'm going to burst evolve for 0, draw a card, return this to my hand, and then play a Marcus. The returning to the hand is the cost for the condition. It's the condition for evolving. It's not necessarily adding via an effect, so you don't actually, your opponent would not get to trigger this to pass turn and cheese you that way. So that's something you guys should also be aware of. Next deck I want to talk about is one I've been having a ton of fun with. It's going to be Yggdrasil and the Royal Knights, or King Drasil, however you want to say his name. This is a pretty peculiar deck. Kind of reminds me a little bit of D-Reaper, focused on a really cool mechanic and kind of focused on some Digi-Egg in the breeding area that has some crazy effect. But in this case, we've got actual breeding effects, and this is the first time we've had this, so I kind of want to break it down. So the typical game flow is going to be, obviously, let's say in this scenario, I'm going to go ahead, draw my 5 cards, I'm going to go ahead and recover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to, let's say I'm going first, so what I'm going to do is don't draw start of the breeding phase. I'm going to go ahead and hatch this, and then what happens is after the breeding phase, now that I've hatched this, the start of main effect will trigger. So if you look there, it's a start of main phase. You reveal the top card of your Digi-Egg deck, so I'm going to go ahead and reveal that. Hey, would you look at that? It's another Drasil. And then what happens is that place that card in all of your Royal Knights underneath this Digimon as the bottom Digivolution card. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this underneath King Drasil. So in this scenario, as going turn 1, I didn't actually have anything on field. But let's say now, okay, what I can do is use the first effect, or rather the second effect, because the first effect is just always live. Your Digimon cannot Digivolve. So when you would play a Digimon card with the Royal Knight trait, which this is this whole deck, you reduce its play cost by 4, and then an additional 1 for each material it's got. So I've got 1 material, reduction by 5. Let's say I'm going to go ahead and play Magnamon for 7 minus 5 for 2 costs, and then I'm going to pass turn to my opponent. Let's say they play this Wargreymon for 12, putting me to 10, and then what's going to happen is, okay, start of my turn, passes, draw phase, I'm going to draw, and then hatching phase or breeding phase, I'm going to go ahead and not promote, obviously, because I can't do anything. This doesn't have DP. This Digiegg has to just stay here, and then start a main once again, reveal the top card. Hey, look at that, it's another King Drasil. Stick it and all your Royal Knights. So in this case, I do have a Royal Knight. The Magnamon is going to leave play. It's going to go down into here. But when it would leave play, I can trigger this interruptive effect to draw a card and then stick this underneath in whatever order you want. If you had multiple, so let's say in that scenario, I had like a Dynasmon field, whatever, I could choose whatever order I wanted. I could put them like this, or I could put them like this if I want to. It typically doesn't matter in this deck, but the number of materials is going to be the important thing. So that's pretty much the typical game flow. It gets pretty easy once you get accustomed to it. And then I guess the only other thing to mention is when you place in option cards with the Royal Knight trait in your battle area, gain a memory. I do want to actually mention that this effect is mistranslated. So what it's referring to is this option card called the Purge of the Royal Knights. Okay, so this card says main, you may place 1 Digimon card from your hand underneath one of your Yggdrasils in breeding area, and then place this card in the battle area. It has a delay effect. So what would happen is, let's say it's my turn, I play this for 6, go down to 4, draw 1, resolve its effect. Let's say I stick Gallant underneath at the bottom source there, and then what's going to happen is these inheritors are going to trigger because the end of this effect says then place this into the battle area. So since a Royal Knight option was placed, I'm going to gain 1 off of each of these, so I'm going to gain 2 memory, going back to 6. But what this effect actually says in Japanese is that when a option card with the Royal Knight's traits is placed, not specifying the player. So let's say in this scenario, it's my turn, and then my opponent is playing Royal Knights or something, I guess, and I'm going to go ahead and swing into security. It's going to check this card, and then the security effect is placing it in the battle area. It's going to get placed, and then I'm going to actually gain 2 memory off the King Drasil because of the way it's actually worded, and the original text always takes precedence over the mistranslations that we get in English. Bandai's usually pretty good about these sort of things, but that is just something I did want to mention in case you're playing a Royal Knight mirror match, which for some reason, I don't know why you would be, but there you go, in case you wanted to know. And then I guess the only other things I want to mention are going to be the win conditions in this deck, being Gallantmon and Omnimon. Gallantmon's pretty straightforward. It also has a reduction capability of being able to play it from hand for -2 for every 5 cards total in both players' trash. So let's say I had 5 cards in my trash, so now I know Digimon on play. In this scenario, I could play it for -2 off of Gallant's effect since I control no Digimon, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 off Yggdrasil. So -9, -2, -11, playing this for 2 cost. It does have Rush. I'll get it on play, so deleting something is 6k or lower. Nothing's deleted in this case, and then I could just go ahead and swing for game in this scenario. And then as far as Omnimon goes, let's say in this scenario I've got something like this. What I can do is play Omnimon for 14 minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, so for 4. And then Omnimon's on play will trigger. So I can do one of 2 things. I can either delete one of my opponent's Digimon and play just any Digimon. So maybe in this scenario I want to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and kill this Wargrey. End of story. Or what you can do is you can play one of each Royal Knights from under the Digimon in your breeding area. So what this means is from under King Drasil, I can take one of each of these Royal Knights. Now it counts names, not card numbers. So even if you had 2 different Gallantmons or 2 different Magnamons, you can only choose one of each. The rest all go to the trash. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and play out Dynus, Magnamon, and Gallantmon. All of the rest of the sources underneath King Drasil, and King Drasil himself will go to the trash. And then any on plays will trigger, and all of my Digimon for the turn do gain Rush. rush, so in this case I'll be able to use Dynasmon's effect, look at top 4, grab any Royal Knights, so I can take Leopard and Gateku in this case. Gallantmons will trigger, in this case there's nothing to delete, and then these go to trash. And then I can go ahead and swing with these, and in this scenario, because Omnimon says if you played a Digimon via this effect, all of your Digimon gain rush. Let's say I had this Omekamon in my hand, let's say I was like 5 memory, I could swing with these, and then swing with these, maybe get my opponent's security down, and then I could play the Omekamon afterwards for 4 and swing with it immediately, because it is a global effect similar to something like Venusmon or Ice Wall, or something like that, where it affects any Digimon that comes into play. So any Digimon I have that are played after the fact will still gain rush. So really cool stuff, guys. I encourage you guys to try it out. The deck's really fun. Unfortunately, it's just really expensive with the fact that you need basically 2 sets of secret rares. But that's going to do it for Royal Knights. The last thing I want to talk about is going to be the new keyword we actually got. That was a little bit overlooked because these cards actually are not that good. But it's a new keyword regardless. So we've got barrier on these yellow Digimon that basically says when this Digimon would be deleted in battle by trashing the top card of your security stack, prevent that deletion. Couple things I want to mention. So for one, this effect is optional because it says by doing so and so do whatever. So similarly worded to something like Shoutmon and Cross 4, stuff like that. So you don't have to do it. It's also not a once per turn effect or once per attack or whatever. So let's say in this scenario my opponent's got these guys on field and I've got 2 Digimon on field. He's going to go ahead and attack into my Chirimon. I'm going to go ahead and use barrier, trash the top card of my security, prevent it from being deleted. He's going to attack once again into the same Digimon. I'm going to use barrier once again. So you can prevent deletion so long as you have security, but let's say in the scenario where I only had 1 security card, hey, he's going to attack here, I'll prevent the deletion, and then instead of going for game some reason, he's just going to clear the Kirinmon because I can't actually do the trashing to prevent the deletion, so you won't be able to save it in that scenario. The only other thing I want to mention with this is, since it's pretty self-explanatory, is that it can't prevent by any card effects. So let's say my opponent activated Hades Force for 7, so putting me to 4. They're going to then choose this Kirinmon to delete because it's only by battle. Won't be able to save it. And then the other thing, I guess, is this does work against security Digimon, I guess. So let's say in this scenario I've got 1 security. I'm going to swing security here. Security check, it's going to be 11,000 to my 7,000. I'm going to barrier to prevent that deletion. And as long as you've got a security card, you can do it. But again, it is only via by battle. Thing real quick, I did want to mention a couple global effects I wanted to point out as well. Number one is going to be the new Belphemon. It says by placing 1 Digimon card with the X antibody Royal Knights, create from your trash under this Digimon as the bottom card. Until the end of your opponent's turn, your opponent's Digimon with play cost or 10 cannot attack a player. So again, this is a global effect similar to something like Congo, except in this case it's 10 or higher instead of 7 or lower. So even if this leaves the field, it's still in play. So that's something with Royal Knights I forgot to mention that I wanted to kind of talk about. And then the other one is going to be Leopardmon, which says when you play another Digimon, all of your Digimon with the Royal Knights trait get blocker. So even if you play something after this Digimon was already on field, you can trigger that effect and then it'll still gain blocker. Similarly, since we were talking about trashing security cards, Leopard mode is something that kind of reminded me of that, because it says at the end of your turn, trash the top card of your Digimon and unsuspend all of your Digimon. So let's say in the case, since we were talking about the burst modes, you've got Leopardmon underneath this, you Digivolve into the Leopard mode, you do your combos, whatever, it reverts back to Leopardmon, the regular level 6, and then you unsuspend all your Digimon. Let's say in the case you hit a Sorai or something in security, or you just have this guy in your field by itself, you won't be able to trash the top card, but you still will unsuspend all your Digimon, because you don't have to do the first part to do the second. It just says unsuspend all your Digimon, so that part will just hold true regardless. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I think last thing, promise this is actually just going to be the end of the video. There was one more Royal Knight. I don't know why their mechanics are so complicated, but there was one more I wanted to talk about, which is going to be Craniumon. So a couple things. Obviously he's a blocker. The on-play 1 Digivolving effect being this Digimon isn't affected by the effects of your opponent's Digimon until the end of your opponent's turn is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, that includes all option cards, Digimon effects. The one thing I want to mention that this does not include is blocker. So, as of BT13, the new game flow and block timing and stuff, this might have been true in the past, I actually don't know. But blocker is not an effect. It's more like Digimon are defined by having blocker or not. So because it's not like an effect, it's more of like a core mechanic, Craniumon can still actually be blocked despite the fact that he is unaffected by quote-unquote effects. Okay, so that's thing number one. Thing number two, end of opponent's turn, you may choose one of your opponent's Digimon. The chosen Digimon attacks. This works just like the Slayer Dramon effects, kind of, except it's arguably better because you actually get to choose which dude to get rid of. You obviously can choose any Digimon, but this doesn't bypass any core game rules. It doesn't bypass summoning sickness, so if they played a Digimon that turn, you choose that same Digimon, it still can attack. If you got double Craniumon on play, on field, it's the same sort of scenario where you can't double blitz or you can't double Arrestor Superior because you can't interrupt attacks. So if you have two Craniumons, you can try to trigger them both. Only one of them will resolve because you can't double block at like the same time. But anyways, guys, that's actually going to be the end. All right, we'll see you next time.